Hello and welcome to this video on moving from entrepreneur to leader. So in this video we're going to look at moving from the role of entrepreneur to the leader of an organization and how often this can pose difficulties for the individuals involved. We're finally then going to just touch on the difference between being a leader and a manager. The Fast Track 100 is a list of the fastest growing companies in Britain. And some of these startups have achieved growth rates of 200 to 300% per year, which is very significant rates of growth. And so some of these businesses are now becoming quite large. So a question is posed for the entrepreneur about how they manage the business. In the early stages, it might be quite easy for the entrepreneur to manage all aspects of the business. But as it grows and starts to hire staff, then the entrepreneur faces challenges and is no longer the entrepreneur, but the leader of a much bigger organization. So an entrepreneur is different from a leader as a business grows. An entrepreneur is someone who spots a business opportunity, takes the risk to set up a business to benefit from the potential reward. Whereas a leader is a senior member of staff who influences and directs people in order to meet the goals of a group. And leaders will be of much larger, more established businesses, and entrepreneurs will be the people who create them. But often the entrepreneur has to become the leader as the organization grows. So typically an entrepreneur is enthusiastic, energetic, creative, risk-taking. We've looked at some of the characteristics of an entrepreneur. But how will this individual cope as the business grows? A good case study we're going to come back to is that of Steve Jobs and Apple. Another good example is this guy here. This is Walt Disney, and he founded the Disney company. And he had a very close management of the business in its early years. He was very linked and actually didn't delegate a huge amount of responsibility. It's actually said that even 10 years after he left the business, managers were still asking themselves, would Walt have done that? So his presence was being felt and managers weren't really taking on full responsibility for their decision making at that time. So moving from the entrepreneur to the leader, the entrepreneurs must learn to delegate, so pass on responsibility. They need to listen effectively, keep an open mind. A difficult element for some entrepreneurs, but as they move to leaders, they need to trust their workforce to make the correct decisions. Be less reactive and more considered in their approach. Perhaps a good case study of people who've made the transition from entrepreneur to leaders are the creators of Google, Larry Page and Sergey Brin. In particular, this is a quote from Sergey Brin about his management style. So, for example, he has a rule that his engineers must use a quarter of their time to think up great ideas. So he's not micromanaging them, he's actually delegating some responsibility there. Brin also allows the employees to spend 4% of their work time in any other work they are interested in. So again, they seem to have mastered this approach of trusting their workforce and delegating some responsibility rather than micromanaging the staff. As we said before, some entrepreneurs have difficulty in making this transition. And a good example might have been Steve Jobs, who founded the Apple Corporation back in the 70s, the picture on the left-hand side, but actually found it difficult to delegate decision making, difficult to trust others, and perhaps had a different mindset at one point, was much more of an entrepreneur than a leader. And this actually eventually led to him leaving Apple, where his co-shareholders actually decided to vote him off from his leadership role. Apple, as a result, didn't do very well, and then he was reappointed, the image on the right hand side, coinciding with the development of the Mac, or the iMac, and Apple went on to become a much more successful business, and he really mastered this idea of becoming a leader, and Apple went on to become the trillion-dollar company that we know it today. Finally, we're just going to distinguish between the difference between leadership and management. We obviously talked about being an entrepreneur and transitioning from entrepreneur to leader, but also we may need to think about the roles that they might take as managers as well. Generally speaking, leaders play a more strategic role, so they look to the future and they set out the direction of the company. They're really meant to be motivating and inspiring and deciding on the strategy. By contrast, managers play a much more tactical role. So they need to organize and control, and they need to implement the strategy chosen. So it's much more closer control and day-to-day running of the business, whereas the leader provides the direction. So in this video, we've looked at some of the difficulties that entrepreneurs might find as a business grows and they need to move into the role of leader. That's it. Thanks very much for listening.